You're listening to the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast, and today's topic is Stop the Mind Reading and Create a Deeper Connection and Have a More Fulfilling Marriage. This episode will focus on you and your spouse, love language, right? Your love languages and how to use them to experience a deeper connection and ultimately have a more satisfying marriage. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Ever feel like your spouse speaks a different language? Have you ever wished your spouse could just read your mind? Do you and your spouse argue more than you talk? Now, most of these issues I have found in my interaction with so many couples as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, many of the issues that are presented, I find they could have been avoided if these couples, these spouses were able to grasp this approach we'll be tackling in this episode. And hopefully it will be true of you as well. So often it's not so much what we are doing that is creating these issues, right? It's more so what we are missing, what we are not doing. And sometimes we're not doing those things because we just either don't know or we are just missing that from our relationship. So what could we possibly be missing? That's a question. And this episode holds the answer. And we'll do so right after this.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
Okay, so how do we stop the mind reading, create a deeper connection, and have a more fulfilling marriage? Let me say that there must be first and foremost, an acknowledgement that we cannot continue to do the same things and expect to get different results. You know what that is, as many have said, and you may have heard yourself, that is called insanity, right? So we've got to change some things about what we do, how we approach our relationships, and also the different skills and tools we are going to bring into our marriage. Now, let's kind of face this. Sometimes we expect our spouse to just know what we're thinking or feeling. I cannot tell you how often I've heard people say, in a session, whether it's counseling or in coaching, and they'll say, they should know. By now, they should know. I said, why should they know? And they said, well, we've been together for so long, I can't believe he or she doesn't know by now the things that I like and don't like and whatever else is going on, even to the point of should know what I'm thinking. Are you serious? Do you want to put that in someone else's hands? Do you want them to determine and make up what it is and even your thoughts? Are you kidding me? No, you don't want to put that in someone else's hand and put that on someone else. No, you want to reserve that for yourself. You are responsible for your feelings. You're responsible for your own thinking. And that's how it should always be. I don't want my wife to say, I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking, no, you don't. And she said, yes, I do. Or I may say to her, I know what you're thinking. And she said, no, you don't. And I'm saying, yes, I do. Guess what happens? We never get anywhere. We get caught up in unnecessary kind of issues. And it goes on and on. And I tell couples many times, you don't want to somehow get to the point where you're saying you know how your spouse is thinking, right? Because here's what happened. You shut down growing, you shut down the possibility of knowing even a deeper thing that you may not have yet known about your partner, because you have now stepped in and interrupted what it is they were about to share with you, about to possibly let you know something about them in this stage of life or in this moment in their lives that you just stepped in and interrupted. And so you did not get that opportunity. And so I many times tell couples, stay away from that statement about the fact that, you just know what your spouse is thinking or feeling. I wish they would. I wish they could. But of course they don't. And we don't want to put that on them. So what happens is when we are thinking that way, we might get frustrated when they don't seem to understand our needs, right? They don't just seem so aloof or distant or almost even, kind of offhand, where they stand off and whatever else is going on. But here's the truth, my friend. Mind reading isn't a real superpower, and it's definitely not a recipe for a happy marriage. And I know firsthand, but also from so many couples I've worked with in the almost 2 decades of doing this. So I kind of have both a personal, professional, having been married 8 years and counting. I've had some personal experiences earlier on in my relationship. I remember in the early stages of my relationship, I wanted to somehow step in for the most part when my wife and I were involved in the conversation. I had this idea that, I knew more and I was the one who was gifted from God to speak for both of us, and somehow I speak for her and myself. How arrogant was that? It was very arrogant of me to be thinking that. And I remember one day that I was doing that over and over, and my wife, she didn't say anything necessarily about that per se, because she is more the person that, it will stay in the back and not necessarily like the spotlight. So she was not going to be voicing her in any way publicly, embarrass me or shame me or step in. And, she allowed me to continue my arrogance behavior. So what had to happen, though, was I remember God was the one, and I'm not sure if I was praying or something, or just going about something one day, and God suddenly spoke to my heart. And what I got from that interaction, and people say, "Oh, Kingsley, how do you know God is speaking to you?" Well, I cannot tell you how I know, but I guess in your relationship with God, you have a way of being over time, right? Over time, you may not know in the early stages, but over time, you can have an idea that God is prompting you a certain way because you have had trial and errors, maybe done things when that still small voice was saying, don't do this, don't say that. And you know what I'm talking about, right? You've been there. And then, over time, as you're thinking, oh man, I should have listened to that voice. I should have listened. I should have not done X, Y, Z, or not gone to X, Y place. But over time, you begin to get the message. And, I guess speaking for myself, I can be stubborn and thick-headed. So it took a while. But I remember that God kind of rebuked me and said, who do you think you are, Kingsley? Who do you think you are to be speaking for your wife? She has a voice. She thinks, and she is smart, and maybe even smarter than you in some situations. And I remember that from that moment, I resigned from that position and just allowed her to be herself in those settings. And that was freeing. And then also it just surprised me that she had some very important things, very, well thought out ideas and good questions she would ask. And so I was even proud to even watch and listen to that. So it just goes to show that this idea of thinking what someone, that what they're thinking or feeling is not a good place to be in, because you might become as arrogant as I was. But thanks be to God, God has changed that, and things are a whole lot different today than it was at that time. So today we're going to talk about how to communicate more effectively with your spouse. And it's not just doing that by itself. It's by learning to speak their love language. Now, before we dive into that, I want us to remember that our ultimate goal for what it is I'm doing here and why you're listening is that our marriages would be filled with peace and love and joy. Those are the things, the ingredients that are very reflective of a satisfying marriage, of a marriage that truly is fulfilling. When you are able to experience peace and love and joy, wouldn't you agree with that? Am I the only one who would say that is a reflection of a satisfying and fulfilled marriage? I didn't think so. I thought you probably would agree with me that whenever you're able to experience those things, that's what you're striving for. Everything we do, for example, I talk about effective communication. In general, we don't want effective communication. We want what effective communication gets us, which is what I've just mentioned. It gets us to a place of harmony, a place of connection, a place of intimacy, a place like feeling that we are on the same page. We are pulling in the same direction. We are basically joined as one, as the Bible speaks about. And that is what we truly want in marriage. Am I correct? Wouldn't you agree with that? Now, the Bible says in Ephesians 4, verse 3, it says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. But here's what I know. Obstacles can get in the way. And one big one, and this is true for so many relationships, maybe yours as well, and that is communication breakdowns, communication barriers. This is the area I can tell you from my professional experience, most couples, when they come in to see me, they begin here. They talk about their lack or their not having good communication happening within their marriage. They'll say, we just don't speak the same language, or we just don't communicate. We just don't see eye to eye. And that is a big thing. I cannot tell you how often I've heard that, because I get it. That is an area that most couples start, and then once they're able to get in and they begin to unpack, but that's where they would say, to summarize what's happening in their marriage or their relationship, is communication barriers or breakdowns. Now, sometimes when I raise this issue, a person may say, and a spouse may say, oh, we already talk all the time. We talk all the time. And that is their way of simply saying, we just don't need this idea of communication. We got it. We have mastered it. Now, sure, you might chat throughout the day and text and whatever else you do, but are you really connecting? Here's what effective communication with the idea of love languages does. It goes beyond just talking. It goes to the place of trying to understand each other's needs and feelings. So the question becomes, when you hear me talk about effective communication in this episode, are you getting below the surface? Are you touching the important things in the relationship? Are you avoiding those conversations? Because this is where deep intimacy occurs, when you're able to go into places and communicate in a manner so your spouse hears what it is you're saying, what you're trying to get across to them. Now, the concept of love languages comes from Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. The idea that he has come up with is that we all have different ways that we experience and express love. Now, he calls these languages, and he talks about 5 of them. Now, the 5 languages are words of affirmation is one. Now, this could be in any order, is not in this particular order to say that because it's in this order, it's how it has to be. No. Now, I will share with you in a few moments what that looks like in your relationship after I go through these 5 love languages. We'll talk in a few minutes about how they are carried out? What would they look like in practical terms? But before we get there, I want to just mention these five languages, and this is words of affirmation. Now, it's just words of encouragement, it's compliments, expressions of love that spouse who has this as their love language, it means a lot to them. They feel loved, they feel cared for, they feel like you understand them when you're able to communicate in this manner, because this is how they understand love, words of affirmation. The second one is acts of service. Now, acts of service is simply where you show care by doing things, right? Practical things, for example, maybe doing the chores that your partner loves to see you joining in and helping them out. Maybe running errands for them. It's any acts of service that you can do that makes them feel as if you understand them. They get great pleasure and great joy and feeling a sense of love from you when you're able to communicate in this manner. Like I said, I'll share with you some practical things in a few moments. The third one is receiving gifts. Now, gifts could be big or small. It's just a way of showing that you're thinking of them and that they matter. That is where you'll see this happen, that a person will give gifts because this is their love language. And we tend to give what we want for ourselves. And we'll kind of talk about that because this is one way to know what the love language of your partner is all about. The fourth one is quality time. This person who has this love language craves or focused attention. They feel loved when you spend quality time with them. That is how they believe and trust that you truly love them. That is what it is that they want from you. Here's what I find out many times. These things that your spouse, your partner wants, I guarantee it's not the thing you are most comfortable with or is something that you think about all the time. Because again, it's not your love language. Therefore, it's going to take intentionality. It's going to require for you to make this special effort to do that. And the fifth one is physical touch, holding hands, hugs, and any other form of physical touch that are important ways that you're communicating that your partner will feel loved and connected. Now, all of these love languages have something in common. It's going to require you to do something that, like I said, is more than likely outside of your comfort zone. And these verses of scripture will help us understand if we're truly going to communicate in that manner, we have to embrace these verses of scripture in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 7. And it reads, "Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor. It does not seek its own. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." That is really what love does. And you may want to go back and listen to that or read that for yourself, because if you're going to love your partner the way that they want to be loved, this is going to be true, have to be true of you. So I would encourage you, for example, if you were to reread these verses from verse 4 to 7, and you happen to put your name and substitute your name where the word love is. For example, it says, "Love is patient, love is kind." I would say, Kingsley is patient, Kingsley is kind. Now, if you get to those two parts and you're thinking, wait a minute, it doesn't sound in alignment or authentic, because I know there are parts of me that's not in alignment to being patient or kind in my behavior, in my action, in my words. So it's going to be hard for me to realize that if I'm going to be true to these verses, I'm going to have to do this and ask, number one, God for help, but number two, make the effort to do these things. You know, Soren Kierkegaard makes this quote. He said this: "We speak two languages, the one we use with words and the one we use with actions," right? So it's verbal and nonverbal. And all of us speak those two languages. Now, question becomes, how do you identify your partner's love language? What do you need to do to be able to pick up on what that is? Some people will tell me that it's hard to find out. And number one, there is a self-assessment or a love language assessment you could do in that 5 Love Languages book. That book is very old, and you can pick that up for little or nothing, maybe even free. And some still will have the quiz in the back. It's not like a tear out thing where people need to tear it out. So you can really go back there and take the test or the quiz and see where your love language is and your partner. Another way is pay attention to what your spouse complains about, or pay attention to what do they often ask for. How do they express love to you? Like I said earlier, most times a couple, a partner, a spouse, he or she will be giving you what they want for themselves. If your spouse then tend to buy a lot of gifts and give you gifts quite often, the chance is that is their love language. That is their love language. Now, so you figured out then your spouse's love language. Now what? It's not just knowing what it is. What do you need to do with that? Now, for example, my love language is words of affirmation. The way that my wife communicates this to me and makes me feel as if she cares or notices is when she is able to say something about what I do. Namely, most times it's when I've gone out in the yard on the weekends and done yard work. My landscaping, my cutting the grass and all the different things. And she'll say something about that, the work that I do, things that I do, or maybe if I, performed, say I do a speech somewhere, or I spoke at a church setting or wherever. I did a retreat. I remember I did a retreat in recent times, a marriage retreat. And after the end of the day, it was an all-day retreat. We ended about 3 p.m., started from 9 till 3 p.m. That's really much a long day. We had lunch and all those different things. But to hear my wife would say at the end of the day what her thoughts about what my execution of that, how I was able to manage the audience and interaction and break things up and make things move and not having this long lull of a boring session. People were actually doing things almost all day. And she would mention that. That's words of affirmation. That means a lot to me. Okay. Now, say yours is acts of service or your partner is, then it's when you do things and you see how they light up. Maybe you make dinner and surprise them. Maybe you decide and volunteer to pick up something for them that they may have to have on their own take care of. You've done an act of service. Again, gifts, small token. You purchase a small item. It doesn't have to be expensive, but you did something on that person's behalf. That means a lot to them. These are the primary love language. Quality time, when you're able to spend some time with your partner on a date night, or just, embracing or sitting together, watching a movie or whatever you'd like to do. That's quality time. Physical touch, a hug, maybe just every now and then walking up and do like a kiss or anything of that kind that your love partner, if that is what their love language is, you will want to do those things. Again, remember now, it's not going to be as comfortable or as easy going or as something you think about often. You've got to be very intentional. Over time, you get to know that and it becomes second nature because you've been doing it for so long. Now you know what that may look like in your relationship. Now, here's what I find sometimes people may say, well, what if our love languages are different? That's a great question, right? The beauty is you don't have to become fluent in all 5 languages. All you need to do is just learn your partner's primary language and then make an effort to to attend to that. That can make a huge effort. Huge difference. Now, when you're able to practice this, and I want to encourage you that maybe set aside a week or 2 I would just say a week as an experiment, and just use that week to speak your partner's love language. Make sure you go out of your way to communicate that and see how it feels and see what comes as a result of that. Because remember now, my friend, effective communication is a two-way street, right? Once you start speaking your partner's love language, she is going to open to learning yours as well. And then this mutual exchange takes place. Now, here's how you can also quickly strengthen your communication around those things to figure out what your partner's love language is pay attention. Active listening. We know I've spoken about that in different times in different episodes. So, you've heard me mention about what active listening is. And I mentioned also about asking clarifying questions. Be curious. Avoid interrupting. Use empathy and understanding. These communication skills will also help you to truly get to know your partner's love language much easier. Deepak Chopra says, the most basic form of respect is to listen. The most basic form of respect is to listen. When you're able to listen to your partner and get to know their love language, that is respecting the relationship and respecting them. So by learning to speak each other's love language and practice effective communication skills, you're going to realize that you can create a deeper connection and build a marriage that's truly fulfilling and satisfying. Remember, a little effort can go a long way in strengthening your relationship. We've come to the end of another exciting episode, and I'm glad you were here. If you like what you've heard and want to go deeper, you want to begin by practicing having better communication with your spouse, like you heard me mention. And I've created a free resource called 28 Daily Conversation Starter Guide that you can have simply by asking. So simply go to happiermarriagesecrets.com/start and request your copy. It's yours free for the asking. You'll find things to start talking about with your partner that's in that guide, and it makes it easier for you to have a conversation. The more you practice doing this, the better you will become at handling tough conversations that will come. You'll get in the habit of talking about things with your spouse and listening, and all the active skills, the communication skills I mentioned will be in play. So get your free copy today at happiermarriagesecrets.com/start, and the links will be in the description of this episode. Now, my friend, may the Lord bless you and give you his peace, both now and forever. Amen. God bless you until next time.